Hello, my dear listeners. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 70 years old. I've lived through 7 decades of joy, sorrow, triumph, and heartbreak. I've raised children, buried a husband, built a career, and watched the world change in ways I never could have imagined when I was young. But today, I want to share with you a story that happened just 10 years ago. A story that taught me that the heart never truly grows old, and that love, real love, can find us at any stage of life. This is a story about love after 60, about the courage it takes to open your heart again when you thought that chapter of your life was closed forever. It's about a woman named Cordelia. Yes, like Shakespeare's daughter in King Lear, who discovered that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not in the spring of youth, but in the autumn of our years. Before I tell you Cordelia's story, let me say this. If you're listening and you're past 60 or approaching it, and you think romance is behind you, I hope this story will change your mind. Love doesn't have an expiration date. The heart doesn't retire. And sometimes the love we find later in life is deeper, more meaningful, and more precious because we finally understand what truly matters. Now, let me tell you about Cordelia Ashworth. Cordelia had been alone for 8 years when this story begins. 8 years since her husband Harold passed away from cancer, leaving her in their empty house with 35 years of memories and a future she had never imagined facing alone. At 62, she had settled into what she thought would be her final chapter, volunteering at the library, tending her garden, video calls with her grown children who lived across the country, and the comfortable routine of solitude. She had convinced herself she was content. After all, she had had her great love with Harold. How many people are blessed with one true love in their lifetime? Surely, it would be greedy to expect another. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was a Tuesday morning in October when Cordelia first saw Thaddeus Millbrook at the farmer's market. Not that she paid him much attention at first. He was just another silver-haired gentleman examining the autumn squash with the same careful concentration she applied to selecting her weekly vegetables. But there was something about the way he held a butternut squash up to the light, testing its weight, that reminded her of Harold's methodical approach to everything in life. Thaddeus, Thad, as she would later learn he preferred, was 68 and had been widowed for 5 years. His wife Margot had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving him reeling in a way he never thought possible. Unlike Cordelia, who had months to prepare for Harold's departure, Thad had kissed his wife goodbye on a Monday morning and never saw her alive again. Their first conversation happened purely by accident. Cordelia was reaching for the last bag of Rome Beauty apples when another hand reached for the same bag. Their fingers brushed, just barely, and both pulled back as if they'd touched something electric. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Cordelia said, feeling a blush creep up her neck. How silly, she thought, blushing like a schoolgirl at 62. "Please, take them," Thad said, his voice gentle and warm. "I was actually debating between these and the Honeycrisps anyway." "Are you sure? They're perfect for pie, and I'd hate to—" "Do you bake often?" he asked, and something in his tone made her look up and really see him for the first time. He had kind eyes, the kind of eyes that crinkled at the corners from years of genuine smiles. His hair was completely silver, neatly combed, but slightly mussed by the October breeze. He wore a navy cardigan over a white shirt, and Cordelia noticed his hands were clean and well-maintained, the hands of someone who took care with details. "I used to," she found herself saying. "I haven't baked much since. Well, it seems silly to make a whole pie for just myself." Thad nodded with understanding that needed no explanation. "I know exactly what you mean. I keep thinking I should cook real meals, but then I end up with a sandwich for dinner more often than I care to admit." They stood there for a moment, two people recognizing something in each other that they hadn't expected to find at the farmer's market on a Tuesday morning. I'm Thaddeus, by the way. Thad, Cordelia. Like the daughter in King Lear? She smiled, the first genuine smile she felt in months. You know your Shakespeare. Retired English teacher, he said, with a self-deprecating grin. Occupational hazard. And just like that, standing between the apple vendor and the pumpkin display, two lonely hearts began to recognize they might not have to be quite so lonely anymore. But recognizing the possibility of connection and acting on it are two very different things, especially when you're past 60 and haven't thought about romance in years. Over the following weeks, they kept running into each other. At the library, where Thad was researching local history for a book he was thinking about writing. At the grocery store, where they'd nod politely and exchange pleasantries about the weather. At the coffee shop downtown, where Cordelia had started stopping after her morning walks. Each encounter was friendly but careful, like two people testing the temperature of water before deciding whether to wade in. They were both aware of an attraction, a pull toward each other, but neither quite knew what to do about it. The problem, Cordelia discovered, was that dating at 62 was nothing like dating at 22, or even 32. The rules had changed, or perhaps disappeared entirely. Was she supposed to wait for him to ask her out? Should she make the first move? What did dating even mean at their age? More challenging than the logistics were the emotions. Cordelia found herself lying awake at night, feeling guilty for the flutter in her stomach when she thought about Thad's smile. Harold had been dead for 8 years, but was it somehow disloyal to feel attracted to another man? Was she betraying his memory by hoping she might care for someone else? And then there were the practical concerns that never entered her mind in her youth. What would her children think? Would they see a relationship as a betrayal of their father's memory? What about finances? Would dating at their age mean complicated discussions about wills and inheritance? What if one of them got sick? Was it fair to enter a relationship knowing that the chances of loss and heartache were so much higher than they had been 40 years ago? These questions swirled in Cordelia's mind for weeks, until one rainy Thursday afternoon at the library changed everything. She was in the biography section, looking for a book about Eleanor Roosevelt, her namesake and longtime inspiration, when she heard a familiar voice from the next aisle over. "Excuse me, do you know if there's a book about the history of this town? I'm particularly interested in the founding families." It was Thad, talking to the librarian, and Cordelia found herself smiling before she could help it. Without really thinking, she walked around the corner. "Are you writing that book you mentioned?" she asked. He turned, and his face lit up when he saw her. "Cordelia!" "Yes, I'm trying to, though I'm beginning to think I bit off more than I can chew." "What's it about?" "Well, that's the problem. I started researching the founding families, but then I got interested in the Underground Railroad connections, and then I discovered some fascinating stories about the women who ran businesses here in the 1800s. And now I don't know if I'm writing 3 different books or one very confused one." Cordelia laughed. "Sounds like you need a research assistant." The words hung in the air between them. She hadn't meant it as an offer exactly, but suddenly she realized she wanted it to be one. "I couldn't ask you to. You didn't ask. I offered." She paused, feeling brave in a way she hadn't felt in years. "That is, if you'd want the help. I was a research librarian before I retired, and I have plenty of time these days." Thad studied her face carefully. "Are you sure? It would mean spending quite a bit of time together. Digging through old records, visiting historical sites." "It sounds wonderful," Cordelia said, and meant it. And so began what Cordelia would later call their courtship by historical research. 3 days a week, they met at the library to pore over old newspapers, property deeds, and census records. They visited old churches and cemeteries, tracing the stories of families who had lived and loved and died in their town over 2 centuries. Working together, they discovered they made an excellent team. Thad had the big-picture vision and the storytelling instincts, while Cordelia had the methodical research skills and an eye for the telling details that brought history to life. More importantly, they discovered they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Thad had a dry sense of humor that caught Cordelia off guard and made her laugh in a way she had forgotten she could. Cordelia had insights about people and relationships that helped Thad see the human stories behind the historical facts. They could work in comfortable silence for hours, and they could talk for just as long without running out of things to say. But they were still just friends. Very careful, very proper friends who happened to spend a lot of time together researching a book. The shift came on a cold November afternoon when they were visiting the old Millfield Cemetery, trying to locate the grave of Araminta Blackwood, one of the town's first female business owners. The cemetery was larger than they had expected, and they had been searching for over an hour when Thad suddenly stopped walking. "Cordelia," he said quietly. She looked up from the grave marker she had been examining and saw him standing perfectly still. Staring at a headstone about 20 feet away, she walked over and read the inscription, "Margot Elizabeth Millbrook, beloved wife and mother, 1950-2018. Cordelia felt her heart clench. In all their weeks of working together, Thad had rarely mentioned his late wife directly. She had learned about Margot in pieces, that she had been a teacher too, that she had loved gardening, that she had died suddenly. But seeing her grave made the loss feel immediate and real. "I haven't been here since the funeral," Thad said softly. "I kept meaning to come, but I guess I wasn't ready." Cordelia stood beside him quietly, not sure what to say. The November wind was cold, and the sky was getting dark. She could see that Thad was struggling, his hands clenched at his sides. "She would have liked you," he said suddenly. "Margot would have liked you very much. She always said I needed someone who could keep up with my scattered brain and wasn't afraid to tell me when I was being ridiculous." Cordelia felt tears prick her eyes. "Harold would have liked you too. He always said I was too serious, that I needed someone who could make me laugh." They stood there in the growing darkness, 2 people acknowledging their lost loves while recognizing their growing feelings for each other. It felt like a sacred moment, a bridge between their past and their possible future. "Cordelia," Thad said finally, would you like to have dinner sometime? Not for research, just dinner." She looked at him, really looked at him. This kind, funny, intelligent man who made her feel like herself again, who had brought laughter back into her days. Then she looked at Margot's grave, and somehow she knew that love wasn't a finite resource. Loving Thad wouldn't mean loving Harold any less. Hearts don't have limited space. They expand. "I would like that very much," she said. Their first date was both wonderful and terrifying. Thad picked her up at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening, wearing a suit that was slightly too big. He had lost weight since Margot's death and hadn't bothered to have his clothes altered. Cordelia had changed outfits 3 times before settling on a navy dress she hadn't worn in years and pearl earrings that had been her mother's. They went to a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place they had both into countless times with their spouses, but never together. Everything felt new and strange and exciting and sad all at once. "I have to admit," Thad said after they had ordered, "I have no idea what I'm doing. I haven't been on a first date since 1975. Cordelia laughed, some of her nervousness dissipating. "1973 for me. Harold asked me to a movie, The Way We Were. I cried through the whole thing, and he thought it was because of the movie. I didn't tell him until years later that I was just nervous." "What made you finally tell him?" "We were watching it again on television, maybe 10 years later. I started laughing during the sad parts, remembering how nervous I had been. He looked at me like I was crazy until I confessed. And what did he say? Cordelia smiled at the memory. He said, "Well, that explains why you wouldn't let me hold your hand. I thought you didn't like me." They shared stories throughout dinner, not just about Harold and Margot, but about their children, their careers, their dreams and disappointments. Cordelia learned that Thad had always wanted to write, but had been too afraid to try until after retirement. Thad learned that Cordelia had given up her dream of traveling to focus on raising her family, and had always regretted not seeing more of the world. "Where would you go?" he asked. "If you could go anywhere." "Ireland," she said without hesitation. "My grandmother was Irish, and she used to tell me stories about the countryside where she grew up. I always imagined visiting there, maybe tracing our family history." "What's stopping you?" Cordelia paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. I don't know exactly. It seems like something you do with someone, not alone." "It doesn't have to be alone," Thad said quietly. The words hung between them, full of possibility and promise. After dinner, Thad walked her to her door. They stood on her front porch, both acutely aware that this was the moment that would define what happened next. "I had a wonderful time," Cordelia said. "So did I." He paused, looking nervous. "Cordelia, I should probably tell you, I'm not sure I remember how to do this. The dating thing, I mean. I feel like I'm making it up as I go along." She smiled. "I think we both are, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we get to make our own rules." "What kind of rules?" "Honest ones, kind ones. Rules that say we can take our time, and we can make mistakes, and we can talk about Harold and Margot when we need to. Rules that say it's okay to be scared and excited at the same time." Thad nodded slowly. "I like those rules." He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. The perfect first kiss for two people learning to love again. Over the following months, Cordelia and Thad navigated the unique challenges of dating after 60. There were beautiful moments, long walks where they talked for hours, quiet evenings reading together in her living room, the joy of discovering they both loved old movies and could spend entire Sundays watching classic films. But there were also difficulties that younger couples never face. When Cordelia got the flu in January, she had to decide whether to tell Thad. She had been caring for herself alone for so long that letting someone else worry about her felt foreign and frightening. When Thad's arthritis flared up and he had to cancel their plans to visit a historical site, he felt like he was failing her, showing his age in a way that embarrassed him. The hardest challenge came when they decided to tell their children about their relationship. Cordelia's daughter Sarah was supportive but worried. "Mom, I'm happy you're not alone anymore, but are you sure you're ready for this? What if he gets sick? What if you get sick? You're both at an age where..." Something like that. Her son Michael was more direct. "Doesn't this feel like you're replacing him?" Cordelia had expected these questions, but they still stung. How do you explain to your children that loving someone new doesn't diminish the love you had for their father? How do you make them understand that loneliness is its own kind of death, and that choosing to love again is an act of hope, not betrayal? Thad faced similar concerns from his children, along with practical questions about finances and inheritance that made both of them realize how complicated relationships become when you've lived long enough to accumulate assets, histories, and responsibilities. These conversations forced Cordelia and Thad to have honest discussions about what they wanted their relationship to be. Did they want to live together, get married, keep separate homes and finances? What would happen if one of them became seriously ill? "I won't lie to you," Thad said during one of their long talks. "I'm scared. I'm scared of losing someone I love again. I'm scared of becoming a burden. I'm scared that we're too old for this kind of happiness." "I'm scared too," Cordelia admitted, "but I'm more scared of living the rest of my life without taking this chance. Yes, we might face illness. Yes, One of us will probably die before the other. But isn't some love better than no love? Isn't some happiness worth the risk of future pain? By spring, they had found their rhythm. They maintained their separate homes, but spent most evenings together. They traveled, not to Ireland, not yet, but to historical sites around their state, combining their shared love of history with their growing love for each other. They finished Thad's book together, a beautiful collection of stories about the ordinary people who had built their town over 2 centuries. The book launch party was held at the library on a warm evening in May, exactly 1 year after they had first talked among the biography shelves. Cordelia looked around the room at the faces of their friends and neighbors, people who had watched their careful courtship with interest and approval. She thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 year. "Penny for your thoughts?" Thad appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of punch. "I was just thinking about time," she said. "How at our age, everyone talks about time running out. But this year with you has felt like time expanding. Like I have more life now, not less." Thad smiled and took her hand. "I have something for you." He pulled a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket, and Cordelia felt her heart skip. But when she opened it, instead of a ring, she found a set of keys. "Keys?" she asked, confused. "To the cottage," he said, grinning. "The one we looked at in Ireland online. I rented it for 2 weeks in August, if you still want to go. If you still want to trace your grandmother's stories." Cordelia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thad, are you serious?" "Dead serious. I figured it was time to stop talking about dreams and start living them, both of us." She kissed him then, right there in the middle of the library party, in front of all their friends and neighbors. Let them talk, she thought. Let them see that love doesn't end at 60 or 70 or any age, as long as the heart is still beating. Their trip to Ireland was everything Cordelia had dreamed it would be and more. They spent their days exploring the countryside where her grandmother had grown up, visiting small churches and cemeteries, talking to local historians who helped them piece together her family's story. They spent their evenings in front of the fireplace in their rented cottage, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset over the Irish countryside, Thad turned to her with a serious expression. "Cordelia, I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped. Was he sick? Having second thoughts? "I love you," he said simply. "I love you in a way that's different from how I loved Margot, but no less real. I love your laugh and your intelligence and your kindness. I love how you make me want to be better, to do more, to see more. I love growing older with you instead of alone." Cordelia felt her eyes fill with tears. "I love you too. I love you enough to be scared, and enough to be brave anyway. Then will you marry me? Not because we have to, not because it's expected, but because I want to spend whatever time we have left making a life together." She said yes without hesitation. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony in Cordelia's garden, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and closest friends. Cordelia wore a pale yellow dress, not white, which felt wrong at 64, but not too practical either. Thad wore his best suit, properly tailored this time. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They wrote their own vows, promising not until death do us part. They had both learned how painful that parting could be, but to love each other for all the time we have, however long or short that might be. During a reception, as they danced their first dance to The Way You Look Tonight, Cordelia caught sight of Harold's photo on the mantelpiece. For just a moment, she could swear she saw him smiling. As I finish Cordelia's story, my dear listeners, I want you to understand why I chose to tell it. Love after 60 is not a consolation prize. It's not settling for what's left over after the real love is gone. It's a choice to remain open to joy, to connection, to the possibility that our best chapters might still be ahead of us. Cordelia and Thad had 5 beautiful years together before Thad passed away peacefully in his sleep At 73, those 5 years were full of travel, laughter, quiet companionship, and deep love. Cordelia, now 71, doesn't regret a single day of it, even though saying goodbye broke her heart all over again. But here's what Cordelia learned, and what I hope you'll remember. Loving again doesn't diminish the love we've already given. The heart is not a bank account that gets depleted with each transaction. It's more like a muscle that grows stronger with use. If you're listening to this and you're alone, whether by choice or circumstance, please know that it's never too late to choose love. It might be romantic love, like Cordelia found. It might be the love of new friendships, new experiences, new purposes. But don't close your heart because you think you're too old, or because you've already had your share of love. The world needs your love. Someone out there needs your particular brand of wisdom, humor, kindness, and companionship. Don't deprive them of it because you think your time for love has passed. And if you do choose to open your heart again, to romance or to life in general, be patient with yourself. Be honest about your fears. Communicate clearly about your needs and boundaries. Don't try to pretend you're 35 again, but don't act like you're ready for the nursing home either. Most importantly, remember that every love is different. If you loved before, the new love won't be the same. It shouldn't be. You're not the same person you were 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. You've learned things, experienced things, lost things that have changed you. Let your new love reflect who you are now, not who you used to be. Love after 60 requires courage. The courage to be vulnerable again, to risk loss again, to hope again. But I promise you, it's worth it, because the alternative to risking love is guaranteeing loneliness. And loneliness, while sometimes peaceful, is no way to spend the precious years we have left. So be brave, my friends. Open your hearts. Take chances. Travel to Ireland or wherever your dreams are calling you. Write the book. Learn the language. Kiss someone new. Fall in love with a person, with a place, with a passion you never had time to pursue. Time is not running out. Time is what we make of it, and there's still time to make it beautiful. This is Eleanor, reminding you that the heart has no expiration date, and the best love stories sometimes begin with "Once upon a time when I was 70 years old." Thank you for listening.